In this video, we dive into the sinister world of Brooke Lee West, a woman whose calm exterior hid a nightmare few could imagine. Like her father did in the past, Brooke Lee West tried to kill anyone who got in her way. Someone's life was in danger as soon as they started to fight Brooke's wants. This crime was called the grossest, weirdest, and most unusual case the district attorney had ever worked on. And this case got the attention of everyone in the country. Before we dive into the full story, take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe for more gripping real-life crime stories that reveal the dark truths behind cold cases. Make sure to turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update and stay on top of every shocking development. I also want to hear from you. Leave a comment below and tell me which country you're watching from. It's incredible to see how far these stories travel and how many people around the world are drawn to uncovering the truth. Your support helps keep these stories alive, honors the victims, and reminds us why these cases must never be forgotten. Now let's get started. A Las Vegas warehouse manager reported a bad smell emanating from one of the storage containers to the police on February 5, 2001. Before he broke the lock and opened the door, he had made an unsuccessful attempt to get in touch with the owner of the apartment. Police discovered a sealed plastic garbage barrel inside that was seeping an odd liquid and giving off a foul odor. Later, it was discovered that a severely decomposed corpse was within the barrel. Because of its size, officers initially believed it to be a child's body. To their surprise, however, they found the body of a week-old woman after the remains were removed from the barrel, and the plastic wrap surrounding them was unwound. Police discovered a pocketbook with an ID belonging to a certain Christine Smith in the same storage facility. There, books like the Geography of Witchcraft and the Satanic Bible were also found. Detectives determined Smith had vanished 3 years prior, following a forensic analysis and comparison with police missing persons records. A plastic bag had been placed over the victim's face. It implied that she had either been strangled or choked. Regretfully, detectives were unable to pinpoint Christine's precise cause of death because of the severe decomposition. Born in 1932 amid the Great Depression, Christine Smith came from an immigrant family from Eastern Europe. Her early years were challenging. She was poor as a child. The family had a really unusual way of surviving. The girl was compelled to work for adult males after her parents essentially sold their daughter. That's why Christine hurried into marriage at 16 and left school at 13. Because her spouse carried on the traditions of her parents, the marriage was incredibly poisonous. The little girl was coerced into prostitution by him. Her husband, whom she viewed as a gangster, made her feel ashamed, angry, and afraid. About 2 years passed during the marriage. Then she was able to go away. Leroy Smith, a U.S. Army veteran and former member of the El Paso Police Department, was Christine's second spouse. They had a boy named Travis and a daughter named Brooke. The family relocated to California in an attempt to capitalize on fresh economic prospects when Leroy lost his police career. Leroy was a contentious individual. Living with him was not ideal because he was deeply immersed in the occult, practiced Satanism, and publicly declared white supremacy. Leroy's and Christine's outcomes were very similar. Smith's parents were Russian immigrants who came to the United States when he was a baby. The youngster witnessed his inebriated father use an axe to assault his mother when he was 5 years old. A routine family dispute turned tragic. Using the axe, the man severed his wife's head. The woman died, of course. Leroy's father was imprisoned for killing his own wife, leaving him to be raised by his 3 elder sisters. However, the child's struggles continued after that. The sisters soon became weary of giving up their youth to care for their younger brother. The sisters didn't want to watch a little boy. They wanted freedom. Leroy was placed on a bus with a message stating that his father was incarcerated, his mother had passed away, and he was an orphan. The sisters thought the youngster would be looked after by someone else. The youngster got off the bus and started crying after a few stops when he realized he was surrounded by strangers. He had no idea what to do, where he was, or where his house was. He was just 5 years old. When a good-hearted woman saw the youngster sobbing, she took him along. In actuality, though, she also had nothing to offer him. She was an alcoholic and homeless. However, Leroy spent 11 years living with his new mother and her friends in a tent on the street. He never saw the woman who had effectively raised him again when he enlisted in the U.S. Army as an adult. Smith met his heroine, who would go on to become his wife when he was 18. The lives of two young people who had experienced so much pain as children may have changed for the better at this time. Unfortunately, the couple never took advantage of the opportunity to support one another and work through their past together. Leroy quit the Army and joined the police force shortly after the wedding. It seems that his challenging upbringing caught up with him. He started to misuse his position of power and show off his law enforcement credentials. Leroy is the kind of person who should never have been a police officer. First, Smith harassed persons of different races and publicly declared white supremacy. Second, he just pocketed the money from persons he arrested for drug possession, kept the drugs, and sold them again. He frequently detained women who were working the streets when he was on duty and took advantage of them for free. Leroy developed a serious addiction as a result of having constant access to alcohol and other substances. He kept a variety of prescription medications in his kitchen cabinets and drawers, and he drank strong liquor like water. In addition, Christine was not a perfect mother or wife. She attempted to use wine to numb the pains of her early years and her challenging existence. The woman spent much of her time in bars and didn't have a job. This, of course, enraged her police officer husband. The couple's constant companions were brawls, controversies, and drunken fights. They were fiercely envious of one another and were each attempting to establish their superiority. Due to their personal life, neither parent showed concern for their kids. Travis and Brooke were raised as if they were orphans. Nobody cared about their lives or reared them. The children were therefore left to fend for themselves from the cradle. Brooke's father had been discharged from the police for stealing money by the time she reached 7. Leroy realized his reputation in town was damaged and desired a new beginning. The family relocated to Bakersfield, California. The children's aspirations for a better life and the relocation were in vain. Leroy and Christine didn't even think of renting an apartment or a home. Leaving the children in the room, they went out to party while staying at a budget motel. They would occasionally be gone for days. Then, 7-year-old Brooke went room to room pleading for food from other motel guests because she had to take care of her 4-year-old brother Travis. The kids had to put up with constant taunts and beatings when the parents returned from their outbursts. Leroy would take anything was available and lash the children with it, leaving their bodies covered with scars and bruises all the time. In fact, Brooke was relieved that her parents didn't return home at night. To put it briefly, Christine and Leroy had little motivation to make any changes as adults because of their challenging upbringings. They only mimicked the actions of their own parents, making childhoods very torturous for their sons and daughters. In addition, Leroy had a history of cheating on his wife, which resulted in frequent arguments and altercations. When her husband was sleeping one night following yet another disagreement, Christine reached for a gun, aimed it at Leroy, and squeezed the trigger. No one was harmed because there was no bullet in the chamber. After placing the rifle beneath the pillow, the woman fell asleep. It's unclear if Christine realized the rifle was unloaded or if she truly intended to punish her adulterous husband in this manner. Travis and Brooke were compelled to travel from motel to motel with their parents. The kids lived half-starved and without a fixed home. They received unjustified punishment and beatings. Not surprisingly then, both the girl and the boy were utterly shattered. Christine and Leroy eventually separated because the family, situation grew intolerable. The father had left his wife, taking the kids, since he was sick of listening to her make unrelenting but legitimate allegations. In this sense, Leroy likely meant to further injure his wife, even though he was never a loving, caring parent. The man, who had been having an affair with his mistress while still married, soon moved in with her. Christine began dating a married man named David because she didn't grieve alone. The liaison was short-lived. Quickly realizing his error, David proposed that they part ways peacefully. Christine, however, chose to exact retribution because she had no intention of accepting being rejected once more. She made plans to meet David in a crowded bar, ostensibly to talk about the problem. The man brought his wife, to whom he had revealed the affair since he knew Christine could do anything. The couple intended to have a mature conversation with the husband's lover, but Christine was furious. As it turned out, she had concealed a gun under her coat, and at one point she was attempting to shoot David with the firearm. She was taken into custody on charges of assault and attempted murder. Christine was given a 14-year prison sentence by the court. Now that their mother was incarcerated, Leroy Smith had to inform the kids that they would not see her for a while. Little Travis required an explanation, but Brooke already knew what was happening. The only thing the man could think of was to tell his son that his mother had passed away. Even worse, he made Brooke lie rather than speak to Travis directly. Brooke was bullied by classmates when she first started school when they found out that her mother was incarcerated for attempting to kill someone. Children may be quite cruel. Brooke felt unsafe at home and at school as a result. Her life was only made worse by school. Leroy concluded that he had taken the children too quickly, rather than intervening and making amends as any other father would. He loaded Brooke and Travis into the car and took them to an orphanage one lovely day. And that was the best choice Leroy ever made since the siblings experienced care. A calm, quiet life, full bellies, and caregiver attention for the first time. The lives of Travis and Brooke were completely upended 2 years later. After only a few years of service, their mother, Christine, was released and immediately wanted her family back. She and Leroy reconciled shortly. Travis, however, put on quite a show when they all showed up to pick up the children from the orphanage. First, the youngster had thought his mother was dead for 2 years. He found it incomprehensible that she would return so abruptly. Second, the boy refused to leave the orphanage since he liked it so much. Travis yelled and kicked, so they had to pull him out with force. In some way, the kids felt that their relationship with their parents wouldn't change. And that's exactly what happened. For a brief while after her release from prison, Christine made an effort to be a decent mother. However, all of her good intentions were quickly overshadowed by her alcohol addiction. She began drinking excessively once more and vanishing into bars till the wee hours of the morning. Additionally, she typically suffered from severe hangovers while at home and slept on the couch. Leroy persisted in having extramarital affairs. The children's sentiments of bitterness and unworthiness were only heightened by the parents' actions. When Brooke finally reached adolescence, she started high school, and, in spite of everything that had happened to her, she graduated with honors. The girl intended to live away from her family as soon as she finished school. She saw joining the Army as the only reasonably priced option. However, there are certain traits that make a good soldier. Brooke didn't stay in the Army long since she soon came to the conclusion that it wasn't for her. She was forced to go back to her mother's home. Even though she had only been in the military for a few months, her parents had managed to quarrel and break up once more. For good this time. Travis, her younger brother, also moved out. The young man had mental health problems. He became homeless after he began the illicit narcotics that were readily available in the residence. The Smith family's life drastically changed after the split. After realizing she'd been living a bad life for years, Christine turned to Christianity in an attempt to change her ways. She wanted to stop drinking and stop using illegal drugs altogether. Leroy, her husband, made the exact opposite decision. He met a woman who claimed to be a dark witch. She was always discussing magic, curses, love charms, and other such topics with her new acquaintance. She explained to him the benefits of devil worship, how to influence people, and how to cast spells on adversaries. Leroy was gradually drawn into a sinister world by his contact with the self-described witch. He started referring to himself as a magician, going to gatherings in the woman's basement, and engaging in a number of magical rites. Thus, Leroy and Christine took quite different paths. What about Brooke? Although she remained to live with her mother, they did not have a close family bond. The girl was constantly surrounded by examples of poisonous families. The women would argue, despise one another, and then appear to be a typical family, even though Christine had now discovered the correct road. As they say, her daughter just didn't know how to create regular connections. Brooke most likely developed an interest in non-traditional views despite her mother attending church. Like Leroy, she was a Satanist and stayed in contact with her father. In any case, Brooke was itching to leave the home she and her mother, Christine, shared. And soon, there was a chance. She quickly got married to Ray, a young man she met. After moving in together, the newlyweds quickly had a kid. The baby's birth didn't make Brooke and Ray happy because they were having financial difficulties. The young woman struggled mightily to fulfill her role as a mother. She was really tense and stressed up when she interacted with her firstborn. A few years later, Brooke recommended to her husband that they place the child for adoption because she no longer wanted to be a mother. However, Ray had no intention of giving up his own child, unlike his wife, and a heated argument ensued. Being used to using violence to resolve conflicts, Brooke persuaded her father, Leroy, to assist her in persuading her husband. One day, a man in a mask appeared at Ray's grandmother's house. The old woman was shot in the chest as soon as she opened the door. Although the masked man was never located, it is believed that Ray's grandmother's home was broken into by a member of Leroy's cult. In order to scare Ray into agreeing to give the baby up for adoption, he shot the elderly woman, and the plan succeeded. After that, Brooke and Ray got divorced, of course, and the woman had to return to living with her mother. Over the years, their relationship never got better. Despite their apparent animosity, the mother and daughter were unable to live apart. Despite their ongoing arguments and discontent with one another, they continued to live together. Brooke said her mother was attempting to dictate to her. Christine said that she was mistreated by her daughter. Financial difficulties exacerbated the issues, and neither lady had a reliable job because they frequently stole food from stores. They were both apprehended one day and given a 30-day jail sentence. The fact that Brooke and Christine tended to pick up men together was another peculiar facet of their relationship. Meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous were one of their hunting grounds. The women would look for possible partners while wearing their finest attire. This continued for years. Brooke did eventually succeed in changing her life. She secured a stable, well-paying work. She saved enough money to purchase a home for herself and her mother, and she also got herself a brand new Jaguar. Brooke West turned 41 in 1994. She met Howard St. John during an AA meeting. He was 35 years old. He had given up drinking at some point in the past and was now on the road to recovery. Brooke and Howard St. John were married a few weeks after they first met. When the man moved in with his wife and her mother, Christine's dislike of her daughter's marriage caused the home to become anything but ideal. She immediately disliked her son-in-law for an unspecified reason. Scandals over the tiniest things erupted in the house every day. Howard and Christine got into a fight. Christine and Brooke got into a fight. It was a very poisonous atmosphere all around. Brooke eventually became tired of her mother's caprices. She was the one who was helping her, after all. West informed her mother that she would now live apart after purchasing an old RV and parking it close to the house. Christine moved into the motorhome since she had nowhere else to go. Even with a solid wage, Brooke's spending exceeded her means. Thus, money remained tight. She consequently experienced financial difficulties once more. Bills were piling up unpaid. There was no money to be discovered when the Jaguar payment was due. Thus, Brooke devised a plan to commit insurance fraud. In order to get the insurance money, she persuaded her husband to assist her in setting the automobile on fire. Howard St. John and Brooke drove the Jaguar to an empty location late one evening and lit it on fire. West called the police the following morning to report the stolen vehicle. Soon, the burned-out car was located. The couple received $18,000 from the insurance company. Brooke was overjoyed. She could now start living lavishly and pay off past debts. However, Howard was summoned for interrogation by the police working the stolen case because they suspected insurance fraud. Even though the man didn't tell the police anything, Brooke became alarmed, believing that since they released him, he must have admitted everything. Howard St. John's wife had a fit and accused him of treason as soon as he arrived home. As previously stated, Brooke was accustomed to using violence to resolve conflicts. At one point, she shot her own spouse after drawing a gun. His neck was struck by the bullet. Howard escaped to the neighbors covered in blood and ran screaming out of the house. An ambulance and police quickly came. Brooke West was taken into custody on charges of unlawful firearm possession, assault with a deadly weapon, and domestic. After being brought to the hospital, Howard received emergency care. The man lived, but his happiness was fleeting. Brooke was already out on bond when he was released. She was well aware that her spouse controlled her destiny. First, he was aware of the insurance fraud and the car swindle. Second, he had the option to file charges for the shooting, which he did at first. However, the complaint was later withdrawn by Howard St. John. The problem was that Brooke took full advantage of his sincere affections for her. The woman pledged to comply with his requests and expressed regret for her short fuse. She was even prepared to give him the house. Her charms won the husband over, and he thought his wife could change. Tragic events occurred after he went home in the hopes of starting again. Howard St. John was discovered dead in the California National Forest just 2 weeks after the shooting. The body was found by a member of the public near Brooke's home on a riverside. The victim's face was covered in a garbage bag and he had many bullet wounds. Brooke West was immediately suspected. Because of her previous attempts, she was detained. However, the woman was freed since there was no concrete proof. The police believed Howard had adversaries who might have wanted to hurt him. The inquiry into the death of Howard St. John was put on hold for a while. Brooke allowed her mother back into the home after losing her husband, suggesting that she struggled with loneliness. The women reconciled and resolved to begin anew. They used the money from Brooke's insurance to rent an apartment in Las Vegas after packing their belongings. Vegas delighted Christine. She began going to church functions, made plenty of friends right away, and had a great time. Conversely, Brooke lost all sense of purpose. She had no desire to leave her home. Now that everything was going well for her mother, she began to irritate her once more. When Brooke's mental health problems worsened, she started going to a therapist in Vegas. Brooke told the psychiatrist about her childhood traumas, claimed that Christine caused her to have arguments with her husband, and explained her current circumstances during sessions. The therapist came to the conclusion that all of the patient's issues seemed to be related to the mother. Brooke made the decision to take action. She was really tired of her mother. One of Christine's new acquaintances visited the West Flat one day in February 1998. Brooke was standing there when the door opened, but the women had been preparing to catch up. According to her, her mother had left the area, Christine had relocated to California to live with her son Travis, and it was unlikely that she would ever return to Las Vegas. The friend was taken aback. Where could Christine have gone if she knew Travis was homeless based on her own statements? However, the woman avoided asking pointless questions, just departed after taking Brooke's account at face value. Christine was never seen again after that. The old woman disappeared without a sign. In addition to the fact that her son was homeless, Brooke's mother was unable to visit him because Travis had vanished in 1993. However, that was discovered much later. 3 years after Christine's disappearance, on February 5, 2001, tenants began complaining to the management of a public storage facility about an overpowering stench. Some even claimed that it had a death-like scent. In an attempt to find the cause of the stink, the manager examined each unit. It was discovered that Brooke Lee West's rental apartment, number 3J17, was the source of the odor. The manager used a master key to access the container after being unable to contact the owner and discovered a plastic barrel inside. He was unable to see what was inside the trash barrel because it was covered with a lid and secured with duct tape. The employee noticed that a whole puddle of an odd, nearly black, murky liquid had leaked underneath when he approached. The management called the cops right away. When investigators opened the barrel, they were sickened by what they discovered. A layer of dead maggots floated just beneath the lid, and human remains were found underneath them. The majority of internal organs had become liquid due to severe deterioration. The plastic barrel's contents hardly resembled a human body when investigators peered inside. It had a cube shape and was half liquid and half solid. The remains had obviously been inside for a very long period. The victim's head was clearly wrapped with a plastic bag, notwithstanding the general state of the body. Otherwise, it was difficult to tell how long the person had been in the container or how they had died. The ID that was discovered there gave some information. An autopsy was conducted by the medical examiner. As it turned out, the remains belonged to Christine Smith, the mother of Brooke Lee West. Detectives went to Brooke right away to ask some inquiries. In order to be with her son, Travis, West said her mother had relocated to California. Police, however, were unable to find any proof to back up this claim. Additionally, it was discovered that Brooke had been cashing her mother's Social Security checks without authorization. The duct tape used to seal the barrel had her fingerprint on it. The woman was taken into custody on September 5, 2001, on suspicion of killing her own mother. Brooke maintained that her mother had passed away naturally in the face of growing evidence. She claimed that in a panic, she took the plastic container to the rented storage unit after placing the body in the trash barrel. Police hoped Brooke would confess to killing her mother because they only had circumstantial evidence at the time, but she didn't. While they were on a brief excursion and had stayed at a motel, she insisted that Christine had passed away while she was asleep. West feared that the police would not believe her and would blame her for Christine's death. Brooke vowed never to hurt her mother. She did not kill Christine, even though she acted foolishly by concealing the body and keeping it a secret. Brooke's story sounded unconvincing, of course. She was not taken seriously by the cops. However, it appeared that West had the advantage of time. After 3 years, the medical examiner said he was unable to pinpoint Christine Smith's precise cause of death because of her severe decomposition. Some sort of magical ritual was proposed by the unit's texts on witchcraft and demon worship. Police swiftly rejected that hypothesis, though, and Brooke denied any connection to evil forces. If Neil Haskell, a forensic entomologist from St. Joseph's College in Rensselaer, Indiana, hadn't testified, the case might have ended there. As it happens, blowflies are the first insects to land on a dead person's body. Within minutes of death, insects emerge, initiating the process of decomposition. Dr. Haskell concluded that Christine's body was free of blowflies. Rather, the majority of the maggots he discovered are coffin flies or graveyard flies, which are insects that consume dead bodies after they have first decomposed. In order to keep those insects from getting to the corpse, Christine had to be put in the trash barrel as soon as she passed away. However, Brooke's account was entirely at odds with that version. The possibility that Christine was still alive when she was placed in the plastic container was much more likely. Therefore, Brooke's whole story about her mother passing away in a motel room was utterly untrue, because she could not have moved her mother's body to the storage unit without allowing insects to get to it. This demonstrated Brooke's dishonesty. Police believed that the absence of blowflies on Christine's body was proof of deliberate murder. In the end, the case went to trial. More evidence against Brooke emerged during the early investigation. It turned out that this woman had harmed other people. Brooke's father was fighting cancer in 1996. He was seeing a woman by the name of Diana at the time. She said Brooke tried to knock her down after attacking her with a stun pistol. Luckily, Diana was able to get away. Additionally, it was discovered that Brooke had attempted to cash her younger brother Travis's Social Security checks, in addition to collecting her mother's $1,000 monthly Social Security benefits for 3 years, which gave her a clear financial motivation. In 1993, Travis vanished. Travis's body was never located, but after it was established that someone had registered at Santa Clara Valley Medical Center using his Social Security number, Brooke was charged with her brother's abduction. The bill was delivered to Brooke's residence. Although Travis's body has never been located, authorities were persuaded that Brooke killed her brother because of what she did to her mother. Travis's disappearance was still being investigated, but investigators were unable to gather sufficient proof. Like Howard St. John, her husband, Brooke, escaped punishment. In July 2001, she was put on trial. Brooke Lee West received a life sentence without the possibility of release after being found guilty of the premeditated murder of her mother, Christine Smith. Christine eventually came to believe in God and made an effort to change her life. However, her own daughter chose to exact revenge for all the wrongs done to her and brutally killed her mother. Brooke again wanted a retrial in 2004, claiming her mother had passed away naturally while she was sleeping. The prosecution said that the guilty verdict was supported by enough evidence. Brooke's appeals were ultimately denied, and the sentence was upheld. Although Brooke Lee West was suspected of 3 horrible crimes, she was only imprisoned for 1. West was an independent adult by the time she committed the crime, and she was solely accountable for her deeds. Thank you so much for watching and choosing to spend your time here today. Your support helps this channel grow and allows us to keep building a community that values awareness, understanding, and reflection. Every view, like, and comment matters more than you know, and it creates a space where people can learn, think, and stay mindful together. Being here shows that you care about staying aware of the world around you, and I truly appreciate that. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe, tap the bell icon, and turn on all notifications so you never miss a new upload. Don't forget to like, share, and comment below. Your thoughts, feedback, and even your suggestions play a huge role in shaping future videos, and I always appreciate hearing from you. It's your interaction that keeps this channel moving forward. Before you head out, remember to stay alert, trust your instincts, and take steps to protect your well-being. Pay attention to your surroundings, look out for the people you care about, and don't ignore the small signs that something feels off. A little caution can go a long way in staying safe. Thank you again for your time, your support, and your presence here. Stay safe, stay mindful, and I'll see you in the next video.